The video, the reason why I picked the video and I keyed on the video, because it showed Richard Grandin's limitation. And Sam Vaknin was not giving an answer. That's where they're supposed to do another video on individuation to show the nuances, because Grandin hasn't figured it out. And Vaknin's pointer got Grandin in a double bind.
And this is the power of the narcissist. It makes you mourn yourself. If you terminate the grief, you admit that you are no more.
Oh.
Oops.
You're mourning a part of you that had never been true.
Look at his eyes right here.
Oh.
That's something he had not thought of, and that's something that's surprising. That's a blind spot he's realizing.
Oh.
You're mourning a part of you that had never been true.
Oh.
And this is the power of the narcissist. It makes you mourn yourself. You have been made to love an image which is not you, an image which is not you. You have been made to be mothered by an unreal mother. You're mourning a part of you that had never been true, an image which is not you, and there's no end to it. And there's no end to it.
So the narcissist reawakens a childhood shared fantasy, a fantasy bond that you had with your projected parent, but also your projected self in the future with your projected parent. And the narcissist evokes that wound, and then you relive that grief, repetition, compulsion.
And there's no end to it.
If I lose something and it's external and I can grieve for it healthily, it wasn't me, and that's acceptable. But if it's me, it's unacceptable. I can't accept the loss of this part of myself.
Yes, and there's no end to it. And there's no end to it. If you terminate the grief, you admit that you are no more.
Oh.
That's heavy.
Think about it. If I lose a loved one, an external loved one with whom I've had a healthy relationship, it hurts, I cry, I'm sad, but at some point I accept that he is or she is no more. But if I've lost myself, if I stop the mourning, I accept that I am no more. I am no more. I am no more.
It would require Zen levels of enlightenment. I mean, I just don't know how you would do that.
This is Grandin saying he's clueless, which people who watch the video skip this because they have all kinds of other stuff to pay attention. He's saying he has no fucking clue how to get here. That's when he's honest. Then when he catches his mind back, he'll talk about how to individuate. But right here at this honest first reaction, he's saying, I have no fucking clue. This is Zen levels way beyond me to reach this, because it's not about that part of him that's controlling. That part needs to fucking die. That's the hard part.
He does not.
And that part's been holding everything together, and that's the certainty, that's the control, that's all he knows. The part that can control underneath, he doesn't know that, he didn't trust that. That has to be awakened. That's sort of Chantal getting that inner rebel awakened. But now that inner rebel has to learn how to navigate the real world. That's the next step. And the fawn self has to step back or integrate or fall apart a little to give space for your true self to come out.
I would argue, Deef, that the two Grannins that we see, the one with the vaping and the tentacle croissant, is closer to him in who he really should be versus the fawning codependent. Those are the two, and one of them's got to die. But he doesn't want that to happen.
Well, the fawn self is all his successful stuff.
Yeah.
It's his persona, it's his image, it's a very useful, shape-shifting businessman.
But what happens is, and I think I put this in the Visceral Gravitas thing, the girls that he gets involved with fall in love with the vaping, muscly, bouncer at the front, and then they end up with the fawning codependent.
Yeah, but the girls can push buttons, so they can.
You're describing a
they
relationship with
can
a
back off.
narcissist. That's like the relationship with the narcissist.
That's his weakness. Yes.
No, what I'm saying is
What?
he the narcissist? Because he's the one who's coming in like the cool guy who's can take care of himself and handle life, but then he turns into this fawning, take care of me guy.
He turns into this.
And I'm not saying that that's
vaping
the case.
person.
I'm just saying, is that what Brad just described? Is that what you're describing, Brad?
Brad.
Well, to be honest with you, Holly, you've been so rude to me today, I don't really know if I want to respond, but I'll talk to Deef. What I'll say is that I think the vaping person is who he wants to be, and I think it's closer to who he really is. I think the fawning codependent is what he has had to become to survive, and he's not prepared to give that up. But that's probably the journey that he has to be on.
The vaping side is more of his genuine true self or unfiltered self. But
I think that's who he is. And I think that's who he wants. I think that's actually who he wants to be.
well, you also could revert him back to his 20s, which supposedly was a train wreck.
Yeah, I don't know whether there was anything that described a narcissist. It was just a description of a person that has some,
Well,
that
the
regresses.
what he projects, and what he is behind him. And that could be a narcissist. It could be any number of personality disorders. It could be all of the personality disorders. I mean,
Well, so why does he get stuck in this fawn self?
Because he lost touch with his authentic self. And he had childhood sexual abuse, which murdered his soul.
Okay. So when he's in the relationship, he ends up in the fawn self when he's with a cluster B.
No, he's always with a fawn self, but he regresses to the vaping part when he's in a relationship. He goes back to childhood parts, the repetition compulsion. When he's on YouTube and he's on his game, that's his fawn self. That's his performative public self. When he's in a relationship, that mask falls off a little and he goes back to more of his 20-something teenage self.
yeah, he mostly just comes off as just a person with arrested development. He's got some emotional hiccups that are he's stuck a long time ago.
Which matches codependence. If he was more narcissist, a narcissist would have a kaleidoscope of fawn selves, which would be always rewriting. So that's more narcissistic. So you have a bunch of fawn selves, or you're just constantly shifting positions to make each fawn self, each kaleidoscopic type self match. So that'd be more classical narcissism. Are you following, since you
Yes.
brought up this confusion? So here, he openly shared that grieving myself, the self that loved the narcissist or whoever he loved, that is so confusing, it's an existential double bind.
So it would require Zen levels of enlightenment. I mean, I just don't know how you would do that.
And that's it. I don't know how you would do that means I'm fucking clueless. I have no idea how to get this done.
How? Because you would cease to be. The person who is grieving.
Yes. It's a self-defeating,
You see those eyes? You see his eyes in comparison? This is like, oh fuck. I don't know what to think anymore. And those eyes are, oh yeah, You got it right. You're hearing it right. That's Vaknin's eyes, and these eyes are pure terror. Dissociation.
Defeating process.
Right.
You can't stop grieving. As long as you're grieving and mourning, there is someone who is doing the grieving and mourning.
So it's
The minute you stop grieving and mourning, it means you had accepted your loss, that you are lost, that you are gone, that you're no more, that you are gone, that you're no more.
so the narcissist puts you into an existential double bind
Yes.
that you can never existential double
Now you see some sadness there. Despair. Because he's trapped.
bind
Yes.
that you can never existential double bind
Yes.
that you can never
Yes, extricate yourself from.
existential
Can
And Vaknin's having joy sharing this big killjoy, so Pankaj calls me a party pooper. Look at what Vaknin's doing to Granin. How am I a party pooper compared to this?
Stuff.
Of course, Vaknin allows him to intellectualize afterwards, so I'm a better party pooper that I keep people in the despair. Vaknin
you
just
are the
opens a
supreme.
wound and then moves on. That's
Yeah.
kind of mean.
double
I've
I've seen
bind.
this video a few times,
Yeah.
and I've started trusting my body. I haven't nutted it out, but my feeling is that Vaknin is conning Granin because there's something not right with that framing. It's not quite like that, but I can't quite put my hand on it yet.
Well, it's not as complicated as Vaknin.
Yeah.
Or the way he frames it is sort of it's overdone.
Like
I
all
think
or
this is the
nothing.
missing link in the DSM definition.
Okay.
The DSM should have stated that all prolonged grief includes a strong element, if not a dominant element, of grieving oneself.
Existential
So that
double
grief
bind.
is interminable, because the minute you stop grieving, you had accepted the loss, and the loss is you. I am no more. So the minute you stop grieving, you had accepted that you are no more. I am no more. If you terminate the grief, you admit that you are no more. I am no more.
Oh. Existential
Think about
double
it.
bind.
I am no more. I am no more. It makes you mourn yourself. I am no more. Mourn
Existential
yourself.
double bind.
I am no more.
Existential
I am no
double
more.
bind.
That's the best part, the way it's visually done, eh?
Richard is so performative that it just makes me curious how much is a performance and how much is his actual response. I mean, he's such a performative personality on camera.
Yeah. That's where
But I
the
wonder,
Instagram lives, when he's really, really tired, his true self comes out.
yeah. Well, that's why. So when he does this, I wonder how much of that is him buying time to understand it. Like,
I'm amplifying that. If you watch it in
Oh, I
real
know,
time,
you-
you barely even notice it.
well,
He is buying
he
time,
does-
yes, because he doesn't know how to absorb it. But
Yeah.
that
But he does
initial
like a-
insight,
No, I mean, I know you slowed it down, but it was a pretty over the top dramatic thing to do. I mean, it was a really silly like like what a child might do in front of a teacher when the teacher says something complicated and the child wants to have a few extra seconds to process it and not show that
it
they
is
don't
like
know.
a child, but it was not consistent across the video. It was just
That's
on that
wrong.
insight period or the surprise.
I mean, I feel like that sometimes when some things click, I say, "Whoa!" It's just maybe it's
Sure, that's your mannerism. You do that. No, I know. But this was over the top for Richard even. I mean, he
Yes. It's an abnormal behavior based on a long history of videos that we've been able to watch, or I've been able to watch, so that caught my attention. And the context of what it was in response to seemed like that was not... It could be buying time, yes, but the buying time is because it interrupted his map of the world, which is where I thought that was a key point. Because that's partially what Vaknin was trying to amplify or point out. Grannon openly admitted recently that Vakden told him to retire or go to Africa like 5 years ago or something, 3 years ago. And Grannon said that Vakden was right. So Vakden is able to see Grannon more objectively, so he's going to tweak the message to try to get through to all of his fawn self. Yes. I don't think it's that complicated to mourn yourself. I call it you mourn your role, or you mourn your projection of the future, your fantasy bond with your child, which is painful, but that's not really mourning you, because it's mourning your fawn self. But yes, you can frame it your fawn self, the part that's... But that overcomplicates it. But it is an important point that people... The fawn self that's controlling, your superego that you think is your ego, that's the thing that gets in the way.
Much simpler.
Non-duality goes crazy with that by saying your ego is a problem, so we're going to use your ego to dismantle your ego. So it's like taking a thorn to get rid of a thorn. So then once you get rid of the thorn, you throw away the thorn. Yeah, that's sort of the metaphor, but
yeah, much better.
It's fucked up.
And if you are identified with the fantasy of your fawn self, that in the future all this will happen, and if that's your main identity, that's one thing I noticed was that would mean if that's what you have, so you got to keep mourning that, because if you stop it, then you're nothing. And that's why the victimhood status is so natural, because that's where you can keep mourning it.
Oh, this is something I played with because Chantal opened the door to me exploring childhood sexual abuse more, as far as whether that's an initiation or not. So I dived into that, and Ono Loves, who has tons of childhood sexual abuse, she agreed that my speculations were sort of close to being on target. So my next speculation or theory is that evil is too complicated. We overbuild evil and the devil, we demonize it. Like good versus evil. But evil could be simplified as live backwards. So live, L-I-V-E, spelled backwards is evil. And devil, spelled backwards, is lived. So the devil is to live backwards. You're living backwards. Lived. So if you're stuck in the past and you're mourning your old self, you're doing the path of evil. You're living backwards. Even if you're trying to live into the future, you're living in the future to avoid the past, you're still living backwards. And if you're living backwards, you're feeding the devil and you're feeding demons. Because part of being human is we can section time off into past, present, and future. And we can learn from the past so that we can adapt in the future. That's an essential human quality that dogs and other lower species don't have, that ability to navigate fourth dimension time, past, present, future. But we make the devil like good versus evil, so in order to fight the devil, we have moral high ground. We become the warriors for good, for Jesus, for whatever. And then we think that's getting away from evil. But if you're becoming a warrior for good and you're still living in the past, you're still serving the devil. If you're stuck in victim mode, you're still serving the devil. You're still serving evil. Your life, your behavior is, all your attention is around the past. You're living backwards. You're living in the past. That's why you have regrets. That's why you have resentment, because all your mind is stuck in the past. So you actually want to kill yourself, and you have all this suicidal depression because you're having natural human instincts that says living evil, living in the past is bad. Being human means you live forward. You live with the time signature forward. But it's so much fun to live in the past and try to punish other people and get even. Blah, blah, blah. That's the path of Cain, and that's the fall. Or Peterson has all these angles.
Certain that if it happened like this and I can fix it in the future, but there's no evidence you can keep fixing shit.
Well, I have the feeling that we fill a lot of space, or at least I know I've filled a lot of space looking backward, and when I empty that space out, or when I don't do that thing, there's nothing else that I have learned yet to fill that space with, and so I'm left with anxiety. Um,
Because space has been associated with danger or uncertainty, or shoe's going to drop.
yeah,
Because if you're growing up in a chaotic environment, gaps of space mean something's about to come. So you've been behavioral
absolutely.
conditioned from your environment that too much silence, too much space, too much
Absolutely,
loneliness.
so I slip back into looking backward to try and predict the future or deal with my anxiety or whatever. So I always end up slipping backward into filling that space with the looking backward somehow.
Well, you have to. That's being human. Because you can't look forward unless
But
you're
I think it's to do
taking
with
mushrooms
being-
or something to jump to the future. So your only experience base is the past.
I have a feeling that
But-
it's that you've got when you're dealing with the past, it's in overdrive, like and not a loose engagement, a very tight engagement with the past, and that stops the living now and in the future. But it's not that you just live in the future or now. You have some background of the past in the background, but not this tight engagement. I think when with codependent kind of mindset is this tight engagement with the details of the past, and that's why we get caught up in the story.
I would simplify. See? So
Yeah.
it's too easy to create complicated models. Kurt simplified pretty good by saying too much silence, too much space equates danger. I would also say that your nervous system, your preverbal system, saw that anybody else around you who had signs of loneliness equal danger. So if somebody else is lonely, that means that they were going to act out. So therefore, if you get lonely, it means danger. Most meditation,
Reasonable.
all they do
association.
is you sit there alone. So you just get used to being alone. That's the start of meditation and yoga. You just... That's the start of hiking and going in nature. You just get used to being alone. But if you've grown up and being alone and silent meant other people who were in that space were dangerous, you've now associated that anybody alone, including yourself, or having too much space, equals danger. Equals ghost. Equals uncertainty comes.
Well, I mean, I guess again, I can't trust myself, so being alone with myself is dangerous. Yeah,
'Cause
meditation is always
when you're alone with
scary for me.
yourself, at first it feels dangerous, but then you get to boredom. But you have to get through the initial, oh, this feels weird, and then like, oh, goddamn, nothing's happening. So you got to get through that period. But until you do, you're like, with yourself is like weird.
I've got endless paranoia to lean on.
Yeah.
A lot of experience, plenty of experience. No, but I noticed like when I look back, a lot of my engagement was tight. So focusing on the detail of a learning from the past rather than the general idea. And with what happened last year, it was just got very vigilant about anything and felt frozen, like just frozen. And it's just ruminations. And so it would be so much easier to just get into the victim mindset. And that way you can just live in that loop for another 10 or 20 years and say, see, because it's if that's your fantasy of what might have been is your main.
Well, it's funny once you if you're living in the past, once you look at it like I'm a victim and that's my goal, it's very easy to warp your whole world around how to get to that place, that victimhood. Like how it's a very easy, like a very predictable, simple model. You can like almost rest and sit back and almost relax into the victimhood and just be like secure in the victimhood.
Well, that's also the problem of not having boredom.
Yeah.
If you've been rewarded for being in the victim's place, somebody else takes care of your burden, or you forget about it. But if you stayed in victim as a child, and life moved on and nothing changed, eventually you get the fuck up. But since playing victim was rewarded, or no one noticed when you didn't have that boredom. So you got rewarded for victim, or you saw other people get rewarded.
Yeah, I never had boredom.
Yeah.
I was never allowed to sit alone in one space long enough to be bored. There was always something that I should have been doing.
That
And
means
better
drama.
do now.
Drama always controlled you, where Brad put the little clip on the 30-day challenge. And the part that I liked was responding with boredom in a dismissive tone. That would neutralize trolls. Because they want drama. If I attack back, they get drama. If I defend myself, they get drama. If I'm bored with them, they don't get drama.
Yeah.
And if I give a short statement to dismiss them with boredom, like you're beneath me, they're pissed off. Because boredom is life. If you look at your life, just most of it's fucking boring. That's an integral part of being human. We use our imagination to make the boredom exciting, but most...
Yeah. Well, that's what I do. I make the board. Anytime there's boredom, I use my imagination, whether it's, looking backward and living in the past or whatever it is. Anxiety, thinking about how fucking scary Brad is, shit like that.
I take one fucking phone call and now I'm the
Oh man.
Okay, let's see what Beckman says. Separation. He also gives it black and white framing. Oops, sound.
How would you help somebody recover from that phase?
The only way
The only way.
is to go again through separation individuation. So
Okay.
Separation, individuation. When I'm talking about being bored, that's a separation. You have to go through separation to get the boredom. Then after you're bored, then you get up and you individuate. Because you're bored. Boredom slowly becomes intolerable because you're fucking bored. But you have to separate long enough to neutralize the abandonment terror. Then you're just bored. And then there's a natural impulse that says, stop being fucking bored. Or there's agitation that comes out of you that says boredom is intolerable. Then you start being pulled by the thread of your attention and interest. That's the start of individuation. Let's see if Bachman says anything more.
There's a need in therapy, for example, to simply replay the whole process of symbiosis and then separation, individuation, and then constellated self-object. It means self-object that is I, not I, and so on. But initially, when the patient presents herself, she is the narcissist. She carries the narcissist with her the same way the narcissist carries his mother with him. They are fused self-object. When you're telling her, give up on him, forget him, delete him, lose him, you're telling her, give up on yourself, kill yourself, delete yourself, etc., etc. Now, there's a rule in psychology, which is borrowed from the Old Testament. It's called the Talion rule.
Oh.
Talion, T-A-L-I-O-N. Talion rule.
Eye for an eye.
It's a pretty amazing rule. It means that you will always create a mirror image of an emotion. So, for example, if you hate other people, you will end up hating yourself. If you want to kill someone, if you hate someone, if you're enraged someone, you will end up having suicidal ideation.
This is a good point, but he doesn't really explain it very well, I think.
There is a kind of reaction and action and reaction.
I would frame it that there is a Talion law. If you hate somebody, you have to hate your projection of them. So when you're hating your projection of them, you're hating your projection inside of yourself. And your projection is you. So your hate that you're trying to dump into somebody else, you hate yourself. A narcissist knows how to hate somebody else and turn you into a scapegoat. So you can't just hate somebody, you have to open up their womb to dump your hate onto them, so then it's out of you. But without that scapegoating wound opening, your hate will come back into you.
Yeah, I was wondering where he was going with it, because it's easy enough to follow what he was saying at first. Like, yes, I use that myself to like view when someone complains about something. It's very easy to hear what the real root issue is, like that they hate themselves or whatever. What, you know, like you can use that to listen to them and hear their core issue. But where was he going with that? It was not clear.
Yeah, I don't, you know, because Richard said, how do you then, I guess,
well documented.
Heal? And so he goes into,
because that's not Vakden's topic here. Vakden's topic is to cover the literature
he
of
just wants to go
grief
on
disorder
the story
and add a little extras, but he hasn't finished the territory.
Okay.
That's where the next conversation might go into individuation, but
maybe.
I don't know how much Vakden is a good model to teach it. He's close. He's got the academic side.
He has
right,
lots of good information, but it just doesn't tie it together to go
actualized because he's working with his brain, which is a narcissist psychopath. He's not working with humans.
Yeah.
So he's not able to do the final step to translate to the masses because he's not interacting with humans. He's not interacting with normal neurotypicals.
Right.
Yeah. It's very
just like Vakden, or Grannon was more on point when he was coaching, but now he's not coaching. He's not getting direct feedback, so he's out of sync. Right. He's not syncing to the masses anymore.
Yeah, Vakden gives you a clue, but he can't follow through down to the human level because he just has.
Yeah, it's just too much.
He shared
it's
that
like
this week.
He's like a Kindle. Like, it's like he's reciting a book, like, or definitions. He's like a vocal Webster dictionary for this stuff. But yeah, there's no landing. It's just, you know, it's all over the place. But it's good information regardless. It's just too intellectualized for my taste.
Well, it's not just intellectualized. He's intentionally adding jargon. Whether or not it's for his own benefit or to make himself see smarter, or the way he talks, he's adding loops that don't really add much. It's not.
Right.
It seems like it's his style, and he's a professor. Maybe it gives him supply, but it doesn't help the end user because he's not seeing how it lands. He's not.
He doesn't care at all about
exactly.
He doesn't care.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah,
that's the point.
He's loving the intellectual discussion, and he doesn't give a shit.
And he's getting an audience. Yeah. If he didn't get an audience, he might give a shit. But
right, it's actually literally verbal masturbation for him. He couldn't give a shit about anyone else, and that's the problem. That's why it's so hard to listen to.
Yeah,
the content is excellent. It's just is just headache inducing.
Yeah.
It's funny to hear Richard, who's like saying, "Well, how do I apply that?" In a very human way, he's asking, "How do I use that?" And Vakden's real answer is, "I don't give a shit."
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But also, Vakden doesn't have a clue. He has the academic map. But it's a little bit of a step to customize it for a person. So he doesn't give a shit, but also he doesn't have a clue on how to apply it because he doesn't know. But he's not going to admit that. Why would he do that?
Well, the other thing, he's got no empathy for what it's like to receive that information. You can see that he's actually getting pleasure from it. It's taken me the best part of 2 or 3 weeks to actually absorb it and understand it, and now realize this is me. And now I'm at a point, what the fuck do I do about it? And I still don't really have an answer except individuate.
Well, it's a false target. If you tell yourself to individuate, that's your false self that tries to individuate. It's the wrong person.
Yeah, you're doing it around the wrong way. Yeah, exactly.
And you individuate as an end result. The more you fixate on the target, the more the target's going to get in the way.
What do you think of reparenting? What
That's
do you think
better.
of that concept?
Schema therapy has limited parenting. And the 80s or 90s had more, maybe John Bradshaw had more of that heal the inner child and reparenting. But a lot of the people that clung to that, they're reparenting with their superego. So the inner child they're reparenting always has to have a seat below. They never let the inner child have a seat equal. There's always a
like another gimmick
relationship with the inner child. So then that's not reparenting.
Well, yeah, so there's this website called Self-Reparenting that I've read through. It's because who's going to reparent you? It's like you can't ask somebody to go through, you can't enter the womb a second time. That's the scripture. But
well, you need containment.
You can't.
So I agree that the space and containment's what's missing with reparenting. That's my current angle of trying to point out that most codependents are child abusers. They're invading the space of the inner child.
Yeah.
And you search out childhood sexual abuse wounded healers because they're perfect at invading inner children. They're perfect at physical sexual masturbation. They'll be perfect at mental masturbation. So tons of seekers flock to these pedophiles.
The
And
problem
it's too
with
damn common.
the problem with reparenting is because you were never parented really in the
That's
first.
true.
Yes, see, that's the other flaw.
That's true. So you do parent yourself for the first time.
And it's
right without a model. Yeah.
Yep. Yes, exactly. That's the challenge.
I remember searching like self-abandonment, Margaret something. That was pretty good. At least the model was good. Not saying that people were able to do anything with it. Margaret something, or no, maybe.
So the fawn self is the pedophile of the inner child.
Yes. If the fawn self is constantly invading the inner child space, yeah. Dr. Margaret Paul, self-abandonment.
That's a punk.
Yeah. That's a concept. Self-abandonment. That's what we do.
So if you're reparenting with the same self-abandonment energy, that's not going to get you anywhere. You're still using abandonment to motivate your inner child. That's smoke and mirrors. It's just you can't give yourself space because you don't know how. It feels weird. That's all. It's boring. Or first it's scary, then it's boring. And if you've been around a borderline, any kind of space is like they go batshit crazy. So you.
Yeah. No, I like the pointer of get used to the boredom, of sink into the boredom.
Nothingness channel is pretty cool. Is anyone following that?
I don't need a channel for it.
It is actually cool.
It defeats the purpose.
Introducing new people that are not known. So some of the hits are only like 300 hits, but some insanely smart people.
I'm sure I could find lots of things, but it's like attaining Brahman to give me a path, and I've already failed.
Back to the past, yeah. I know. Yeah. Good one, man. Good one. Yeah.
Well, see, when you give a tip of a pointer, you're taking away space. And that was part of the tip for giving Chantal that I think her issue was not just directness, it was speed. She jumped in too quickly. There's a pace and time and dosage of sharing insights. So, some spiritual teachers call that, there's magic in silence. So, let's all be silent for a minute and stare each other's eyes while we're silent. There's emptiness and dancing in silence, because silence is so... spacious.
Let's all be creepy.
And then they take that pedophile energy into the silence. But silence is pacing, is just navigating time and space with gaps. That's all it is.
Silence is power.
Yes.
And I think if codependents are power blind, then they're not going to like silence too bloody much.
Yeah, but that's where you have to go.
I can use silence. I missed your if I missed it, if you were not just jerking my chain and you were actually using Machiavelli earlier. I can use silence. I mean, I did consulting for a while. Silence is a nice tool.
Yeah.
That was something Chantal probably could have used, so that was part of what the teaching was. We weren't.
But in as far as just delving into it, really, sucking it up and experiencing it and just being okay with it, that's a different thing.
Sitting with silence, yeah. Which is the borderline will fill that for you quite easily.
Silence as in thought chattering.
As in what?
Thought chattering away in the background all the time.
Silence as in your background chatter?
Yep.
That's a common spiritual angle. They try to frame silence as that. I think that's setting too big of a goal.
Well, that's what comes up when you get in silence is the chatter.
Well,
and then you keep going until the chatter quiets.
Maybe we're on a different page because I think you're thinking maybe silence from a spiritual angle, but if Kurt and I might be on the same page, which is if you've ever done, I used to do retreats and stuff occasionally for a weekend, and then they'd say, okay, for some of you we're doing a silent retreat. For some of you, it's up to you, but if you want to remain silent for the afternoon, you can do that, but the others can talk, and this was done deliberately. So those that sat in silence didn't have to respond to anyone who was talking. Guess who had all the power?
Okay.
And it was very frustrating for the ones who chose to speak because they were trying to get the silent people to respond to them, and we just sat there with I'm being silent. That's it. And it's a wonderful feeling of power to be able to just sit there and do that. That's where I was heading.
Yeah, but that's still not silence because you're hearing other people talk. So you're being quiet, but that's not quieting your inner mind.
What if it's the same thing? This is an unnecessary distinction.
True.
Because that's the problem with meditation. They paint a certain mind state as the goal, and then you try to make it abiding. So non-duality has non-abiding, non-dual states, and you want to get to this abiding, permanent state. What part's trying to control this permanent, non-dual awakening versus a transient one? And why do you care?
If you play quiet the mind, it becomes an injunction, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. It's actually... You've got to watch the outer. You know where I'm heading with this one, Dee. I think.
So silence is a part of you that's okay with silence and with chatter.
That is silence, yeah.
And when you have
of chatter,
space for both silence and chatter, that space of having that's more important than having a quiet mind. Having the space to be okay with either and being able to manipulate or play with that space, that's more important. So you can take that space for silence or noise and project it onto people to have a power dynamic. That's the interactional silence. That's the gaps between words. That's the tension with the unsaid stuff.
I can command the interactional silence. Mm-hmm. I can use that in ways for the unsuspecting to succumb to my will.
Right there, see? Yeah.
But I can't sit with silence in myself, to just sit and just or just day in day out
And
to
what's
just
missing?
realize that I don't have to fill it.
You don't have the space to sit with the silence. So there's a space that comes before silence or allows silence to stay there more. That space is more important than any certain mental state or end target. The space to be able to contain it, that has to come
The
first.
container, the quality of the container.
Mm-hmm. Because then you can take that container and then you can shapeshift it and project it on the people. So you can project extra silence or you can project extra judgment with your more precise container, a transmission tunnel to laser focused silence or judgment or Shakti. That's maybe the wounded healer gurus. They can transmit Shakti. And that's the container in addition to the transmission. Those are 2 parts.
Too many options. I just need to focus right now on the being okay with not having to fill my time, not having to fill the space, not having to
Boredom.
Yeah. That's all I need to focus on.
It's very challenging, but it's very rewarding.
It's just breaking that wall of, to get to that boredom. And then seeing the intuitive or instinctual parts of you come out in that boredom.
Seeing what you do as a result of the boredom and then maybe not doing that. If it's eating or drinking or smoking or whatever.
Yeah. I'm good at filling the space and finding something to do and finding something quote unquote productive, or
So find something to be instead of something to do. That your guru.
You could probably just be aware of it. Changing the behavior can come later.
Sure. No, I don't have to do all of it at once. It's just, but working on being aware of it, being.
Because that's boredom. Boredom is that you're allowing natural time and natural instincts to come up. The more you're trying to force it with time, change things, that's you trying to wrestle time. You have to eventually adjust to time. Or the flow. So a neocon can try to fight the waves and whatnot, but ultimately kayaking has taught them to cave to the forces of the water. So there's a natural time rhythm that we just have to learn to cave to. Then we can wrestle it.
True.
Like kayaking, I'm sure he has to first learn how to work with the waves, then he can try to, be aggressive or do some tricks or do stuff in it. But it's so obvious in his face because the waves will flip him over or he'll drown. He has to adjust to the environment. But with time, since we can play with thoughts and so many things, we create the illusion that we're fighting with time and wrestling and changing. We're living in the past, but by hiding in the future, the earlier analogy. Isn't there some Christian saying or biblical something or religious saying that if your destiny or God has your future written, and then you setting targets and goals just gets in the fucking way? It's probably not exactly phrased that way, but it's essentially the same energy.
I'm sure it has a fuck or two in there.
I don't know.
I think I've heard that. I think I've heard that before. Yeah.
Last time I was in church, that's what the pastor said. He went,
Get the fuck out of God's pencil. Yeah. He's writing your damn future. Why the fuck do you have to co-opt God?
The best churches have a few fucks thrown in there.
Most of them are running.
Well, so to speak.
Can you imagine how patient God is watching you fuck up his plan and letting you fuck it up? And you just keep getting in the fucking way? Just stop fucking getting in the way of God's hand.
Yeah. You're talking now about God, not the church, Kurt.
True. Yeah,
That
church couldn't possibly have a fuck, but well,
to not want
well,
to
unless well, yeah. Anyway, but but
right.
yeah, I'm sure God has no problem with fucks, so to speak.
But according to his Twitter account, he's got some very strong opinions.
Well, Kurt,
No, God's
Twitter account.
God
Yeah,
has a
that was
Twitter account. Yes, he's quite scathing about it.
getting cancelled at the moment, right in the middle of being cancelled.
He just says how upset he is with everyone. Someone said that it was interesting that if Jesus was born today, he'd be on a no-fly list. A short Middle Eastern Jew on a no-fly list. Sorry, that's a bit much.
Would Jesus have followers on social media? Be like, hey guys, it's me again on YouTube. Jesus.
This morning's tweet from God was, it's impossible to overstate the degree to which you are all screwed. Very. He's lovely, God.
But that had a good ring to it, that song. Forgot the rest of the lyrics, but had I remember when it was popular. But I think it's Muslim or Islam who thinks, or no, it's Sufism, where you're born and you forget your connection with God. And it's just remembering something you've forgotten. So the more you fill your brain with all these external models, the harder it is to remember who you are. The harder it is to connect to yourself. The harder it is to connect to God. Because you're stuffing yourself with crap of the world. Because yes, we have like thousands of TV and movie shows at the extension of our hand, but 50 years ago, 100 years ago, they lived on like no TV.
Yes, I was there, I remember.
How did people
Australia
survive
was a very
in the
different
old
place.
days without TV or internet or just books or even just a library of like 5 books or 10 books? And people still somehow hacked out a life.
They listen
Yeah,
to
so that's why we invented all those ways to fucking fill boredom. Jesus.
That's
Duh.
That's why we invented borderline mothers, so they were constantly fighting to keep things busy. Otherwise, we'd have nothing to do. That was my childhood evening entertainment. Shut the door at 6 o'clock and the fights would begin, and off we go for 4 hours. But New Zealand was worse, Punko. She only had like, what, 1 television station? We had 4, I think. Yeah, maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah, we had one for ages. 5-day cricket, 5-day like test
Oh,
cricket,
yes.
morning till night.
A baseball match that goes for 5 days.
That's pretty progressive to give all the, to waste all that space on all those, all those minorities. Jeez. Wow.
Such a bitch.
I mean, it took a long time for Americans to give, to give space to I don't know, those other language speakers.
Or English.
It's only because commercialism made sense. They just bled in eventually. I couldn't hold back the laugh long enough.
See? Silence is a skill. Space is a skill.
This one got a cushion for your ass. What are you talking about?
Oh, you couldn't hold back his laughter. Pregnant pause.
You do it with that little.
Yeah.
That's pregnant pause. Yeah, that's it. I love that. It's my favorite thing. It's a really perfect.
Steve's tell. It's Steve's tell.
No, it's a punctuation point. I think that's how I hear it. It puts a line and then.
I think that is like it's enough of the talk, back to the party pooper mode.
Huh?
It's the how do I not reach out through the screen and smack you?
How do I get you to shut the fuck up? How do I say he's wrong and he's a fuckwit without telling him?
How do I create some space here?
Or it could be, oh, why do I do this to myself? What the fuck?
Well, it's also his soul bleeding. Yeah.
or if it's funkage, it's like, oh fuck, not this.
Well, it's also the it's also the equivalent of where we insert fuck. It's.
They could probably make like a language of just different grunts.
Yes. We could do the best uhs of Deef.
Stephen Colbert had the best silences of Obama.
Exactly.
I've got a clip of those spaces. I'll dig it out. It's very clever, but he was an expert at putting that gap and then taking it 2 steps too far, and it's very powerful.
So with boredom, it's like it's another way of saying not having a quality container, really, because if there's a good enough container, there's no boredom.
Prove it. Make your argument stronger. That's a conclusion. Where's your evidence that?
That's coming from like an instinct, but I have to. It's not an argument. It's just like I just felt that.
Are you sure there's no judgment that says boredom is bad based on what you just stated?
I've got lots of judgment on boredom.
Yeah, see, Kurt does. I think your statement also has judgment on boredom.
It's if you're able to live with pain, then the container is okay. But it's that not liking pain. So we create the fawn self. It's not we. It's created, and so then that thing stuffs up everything because you thought you were smart. I remember speaking about this with Nehama. You can't use the smarts that created the problem to fix it, but now it's there, and it's looking backwards, and that connects with what you were saying about the devil or the evil. You're going backwards.
Yes, but I'm getting bored listening to you.
That's your problem, Deef.
Yes, but you're making an argument that if everything was
But
perfect, I wouldn't have boredom.
I see. I can do it for like 2 seconds, and I say, "Oh, fuck it." No, it was. I'm not making an argument.
So if I can
just-
control everybody else's space and time so that I can digest it without getting bored, okay, yes, but I don't want to...
No, but if you're bored, that means you're not using your container.
No, your communication made me bored. That's not... How is that my container?
But if you were able to practice silence well, then that boredom would be okay.
But
There's
I
no
have
boredom.
space for that boredom, yes, but I'm still bored listening to
That's what I'm
you.
thinking. That
Oh,
there is
so
no
it's
space.
embrace the boredom. I get it.
Would you get bored if you had the space? I'm not sure, man.
Let me help you. Let me talk.
Yeah, you won't get bored because
No, you will get bored. Let me help you get bored
well, what's
by
boredom?
talking.
I'm so bored.
And here, let me help you and embrace.
Don't you touch me.
But the thing is, what is boredom? You know? Like we just use the word, but what is it?
Boredom is God. What if boredom is God? Just a thought experiment.
That's
Nothingness. Yeah.
that must be the case. That would explain so much for me.
The final ground of everything.
But I'm afraid that answer doesn't fit for other people.
Yeah, it's not just a thought experiment for some people.
For some people, yes, I think that fits quite well.
If all your energy is trying to avoid it or deal with it, then all your attention is towards it. Then it's your God. And then Pankaj trying to come up with theory, mental model that gets rid of boredom, still makes boredom the God. Or the devil, same thing. Doesn't matter.
So it's almost like all answers in and of themselves are God. And therefore, once again, if I'm stuck fucking listening to them, or professing them, I'm once again.
You can't avoid religion. You think we can. You're still acting it out.
Oh no, you can.
You
You can be
can't.
bored.
Materialism.
You can be bored.
It's here,
And
man.
thereby learn boredom.
Perhaps religion was created to alleviate boredom. And maybe so was God.
Yeah, it could be, because
Or
that
God was
space,
born and created us.
God feel. I'm sorry. What did you say?
I
Haha.
said, or God was born and created us.
Well, that's
I
absolutely true.
thought you said anything disrespectful to my God. No.
God of the spray can.
Where's this spray can reference? Y'all know I don't know the reference.
Oh, you just play along. Oh, okay. No, we don't know either. We just make it.
Fuck off.
We all got together before you turned up and went, what can we stir in there? Carl, we'll just make something random. What about a spray can? Yeah. In one of your first meetings, you were doing some art and we were making a joke about the shaking of a spray can because it has the little metal thing in it. And if you look at the motion that one's hand uses to shake a spray can, that was sort of what we were inferring.
Oh, I see.
That some of the men in this room may have masturbated at least once.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you very much.
Of course, I completely do not approve of, and I would never do such a thing.
Oh my God. All right. Thank you for
At
the
least-
explanation.
At least to yourself.
Do you disagree, Kurt, with my summation of the situation? No, I'm getting silent treatment.
Children don't get bored, that much, but it's like the
Really?
fawn self is the one that gets bored.
Where's your evidence that children don't get
Till
bored?
about
Have you not taken a road trip with children?
3 or 4. Till 3 or 4.
Are we there yet?
No, that's not evidence of boredom. That's just, they're stifled in a place.
Yeah, it's boring. Are we there yet? Look,
Go ask them if they're bored when they say that.
You can drive from one end of New Zealand to the other in 15 minutes. That's why there's no such thing as a road.
Well, I mean, that's beside the point.
What? So telling
I'm
them
just
not to
getting
be
that feeling
allowed
it's
is
the
part of the
own stuff
game.
that gets bored
I mean,
because it wants to fix things and there's nothing to fix, so it gets bored because it's so clever. So it can't gaslight, so it gets bored.
I mean, of course, one must tell them to work on being bored, or get used to the boredom.
English.
But I don't know. I mean, there's not really a
There's nothing to fix.
speaking to their boredom is already failing.
Well, if you look at tribal cultures or hunter-gatherer tribes who are still sort of living that lifestyle, they have a lot of manual labor that both the women and the men have to do, and it's fucking boring. So what they do is they make songs and tell stories to fill in the boredom.
Yeah, they're anti-boredom.
Mm-hmm. And then, like some of the tribes, though, when they wake up, they all share their dreams. Also to fill in the boredom. And when they're hunting, they're also waiting boredom. So they use a lot of energy because they're more bored to create community and bonding and rituals and all this stuff.
Like when I was a kid living in like a semi-rural village life in India, I mean, even in Hindi, the word boredom doesn't have a translation. Like there's no real word that I know of. They just say boring in an Indian way, but it's not a Hindi word. But it's because they're just so immersed in some shit is happening all the fucking time. It's like
so there isn't a direct translation of boredom. What's the closest word they use? Or phrase
sad,
or pointer?
Sad is there. Dukhi, sorrow is there. Happy, all that is. But boredom is not. What do you call this? There's a bore in a Hindi accent. They use the same word though. There must be a word, but I'm not aware of it.
Why would Hindi be missing a word for boredom or bored?
We never felt bored while I was a kid in India. I never have a memory of it. There was like always.
If there's no word for it, yeah, maybe you don't have mental
because
space
they never to stop and think.
Yeah, maybe.
Is just to not ever What? Be willing to be bored?
It's like to be depressed is not a concept, like it doesn't.
No, that's not true. That's a different thing.
But in
Of course,
Hindi,
then I'm just
I know
going,
the
no,
language
no,
quite
no.
well. I write songs in it and stuff, but I don't know a Hindi word for depression either. There must be. There must be. But it's like a clinical word or something, Check this.
What happened then?
Oh my god. Yeah, that's how hard it is.
Maybe that's a smart culture to not have a word for boredom or depression. Doesn't exist because it's not in the...
Guess what they say in Hindi? Boring. Boring.
Boring.
That's the meaning.
Boring.
They just use English word for it, boredom.
I'm asking what's boring in Hindi, and yeah, they say it's boring. When you're not interested in stuff.
Oh, being not interested, maybe. You're not allowed to be not interested.
Maybe
in Hindi.
I think before television and social media and stuff, there was just so much time used up in just getting basics done. There's like you just made it. You just made it to the evening.
Doesn't
so
Hindi culture have like that gigantic deity world?
Yep.
So Shiva, Shakti, Krishna, the monkey god, Ganesh. So you can just keep busy chanting to any one of your deities, and you're so busy with all the...
We've got to appease the gods, don't you? Don't you have to put out, there's a lot of work to be done making them happy.
Yep. There's an appeasement side, but then on the one end, it is what you might call paganism. On the one end, on the other side, it is archetypes. So it's like a mixture of how they see.
So Deve's earlier point about maybe boredom is God is part of that.
Well, you might have it split off to all the deities.
Yep.
That might be more like the Greek deity model. So Christian had the one deity, where Zeus and all those sub-deities broke up all the emotions into different spirits and energies. So that was a more complex, multi-textural type, different flavors of God. So then you'd have boredom cut up into maybe 50 different spirits.
Yep.
Or entities, or deities. Yeah, many deities. Where in a one God, monotheistic type mindset of post-Christian, boredom is the doorway to spontaneous creations.
I agree with that.
So then there's one word where Hindi has Kali, Shakti, Shiva, all the whatever. I used to do like kirtan chanting, so I sort of knew some of those names. I was just chanting to random Hindi gods to get secondary highs, because that's what Americans do. Let's go do chanting to Hindi deities and we feel good. And then we'll chant to these other deities, and then we got this mishmash of all these Eastern deities that don't like each other in our yoga studio.
Chanting to different words, different archetypes of boredom. Yeah, that's a very good way to look at it. Yeah.
This song sounds good. I'll chant to this one, then I'll chant to this one. I'll chant to this one.
Yeah.
We'll just have a chant to like 10 different deities, and we don't care if they hate. If one deity hates another one, we'll just.
Yeah.
Why are you treating like she's a singular person that's not in 8 different worlds?
Quite possible.
That's the big.
That's what she said. She didn't say
she did
10.
earlier.
She said 8.
Yep.
So
Yep.
stay on 8.
She's more closer to the Indian psyche. You know, lots of deities cover the whole spectrum. In a way.
Sure.
That's something we miss. So if we had a bunch of a complex spiritual deity landscape, then we would have our emotions as our gateway to all the different deities that are pointers for the energies of different emotions or spirits. Different essences of energy interaction. Where we're overly material and biological, so we sort of... Consciousness is just this one big term. Or awareness, all these pointers, these... Even love. So love, the Greeks had like at least 6 to 10 different types of love. Agape, eros, brotherly love, friendship love. Those were separate clusters of love that we just label love. One word.
Yep.
So just like, we don't have the language, so then we don't see it. And then Hindi doesn't have a word for boredom, so then you don't see the one source of all amazement for Western English logical linear thinkers. Boredom is the key to creativity and wonder.
Yeah.
Oh, this sort of... I think I put this on my YouTube channel, but it's not directly talking about boredom, but it talks about interest and wonder, which is related.
Well, what are stories? They're interesting descriptions of people moving through time and
Those
space.
are the ones that stick.
You bet. Well, no one will listen to them otherwise, or write them.
Yeah.
They have to be interesting. So that means that our sense of meaning orients us to certain types of stories. You have an instinct that signals its presence to you. And part of that manifests itself as wonder. It's the openness to transformation.
Wonder.
So your interest and your wonder emerge out of boredom. Because if you don't have boredom, then you can't have interest to contrast it. You need a lack of interest or an absence of interest to notice something interesting. To wonder about something. So that's boredom is a sort of the ground, the absence of interest, the absence of wonder that can elicit or open to interest and wonder. Then
Because it isn't even the new ideas that are redeeming. It's the process of continually opening yourself up to the transformation of new ideas. That spirit of engagement. That spirit of engagement.
so that boredom and wonder opens up new ideas. Engagement. Instead of consuming ideas that are already out there, new ideas just come out of nowhere. Or your interest follows somebody else's ideas, or two people's interests join together to emerge.
You and I are engaging in dialogue. That's dialogos, right? So it's the manifestation of the logos dually. And what is that? It's redemption in action. That's what it is. So imagine this. You've got a bunch of worn out ideas, and they're blinding you. And I got a bunch of worn out ideas, and they're blinding me. And if we stumble forward in our blindness, we will fall into a pit. So what do we do about that? Well, I talk to you about what you think, and I listen, because man, maybe you know something that I don't that I need to know.
So you have ideas and you get rigid and you can fight who has the best ideas, or you can be open to use each other's reflection to throw out, redeem, take apart bad ideas, to cut off the fat, to lean out.
There's a reason that in Revelation, Christ comes back with his sword to judge the elect and the damned, because that's a symbol of the operation of the Logos. And the Logos, even in dialogue, says, that's an interesting point. We'll keep that. Let's focus on that. Well, we can ignore that. We can get rid of that. We can junk that.
So there's, I would argue, or he's pointing to the Logos, there is an inner instinct that your attention and your focus go toward, this is important. And then there's another balance to that, to say, that's not important. That's not important. There's this natural Logos, truth-seeking discernment mechanism.
There's a thread of meaning that guides this conversation. Thread of meaning that guides this conversation. Neither of us know what it is. We know when it manifests itself because we get interested, right? Think, oh, that's interesting. And then, I say something, you think it's interesting, and you nail it with a bunch of words. And then I pick up some of the words and I think that's interesting and I nail it with a bunch of words.
So that was me trying to interact with Kurt when he came in, and he got upset over the girl's tone, but he wouldn't admit it fully. So then he argued against that girl's position as being human and all this stuff. And then I tried to find his thread. I found his trigger. Then I tried to talk out his thread so that we could come to some sort of usefulness instead of him just attacking a person and using that person as a scapegoat to just dump his reaction. That would just repeat the cycle. But by trying to dialogue and keep the conversation going, we could cut out some of the old ideas and come up with something new that's following a thread.
There's this thread. By following that manifestation of spontaneous interest truthfully, we participate in this process that revitalizes our perceptions. And that's technically true. That's what's happening. And then what's even more cool than that is that there's nothing we can experience that we would rather do than that if it's happening intensely. That's the Logos. Thread of meaning that guides this conversation. Let's focus on that. Well, we can ignore that. We can get rid of that. That's the Logos. Part of the manifestation of the truth is a consequence of the alignment of these levels. It's like, that's what we mean when we talk about someone having integrity or being authentic. It's like they're the same all the way down. Mm-hmm. And not only that, they're where they are completely.
So this could be another pointer for individuation and differentiation. Someone who's aligned vertically and fully here horizontally, both directions. Which could also be maybe the cross, up, down, open. Both directions, horizontal, vertical.
Just repeat the last 20 seconds. I lost you for 20 seconds. Sorry.
This could be another pointer for individuation differentiation. You're aligned vertically. And you're all fully present horizontally. You have roots. Or you have roots down and up, and then you have your leaves. You have your branches out. And that seems to be also linked to the cross, which has 4 directions. And then the bottom of the cross is further down, so that's more into the earth. That's more grounded. Just looking at symbolically.
Do you think this is where we lost Nahama, that we were never able to achieve what he's talking about?
Following her thread?
Dialogue, yeah. That interplay never really happened.
Well, she was pressing the group to meet certain things. And then the group was trying to get the mystery solved, so that was a dissonance. There wasn't enough space for both expectations. I took her literally when she said she needed this and the group didn't hold space. I said, yeah, you're right. So.
Yeah, I think you were. I think you're right.
But the group took that personal and then started trying to force her into a box, just like she was forcing the group into a box. So then those two camps, two positions went head to head. Because it's hard to stay in dialogos. It's hard to stay in boredom to wonder. We want the certainty. We want the conclusion. But that's our idea that we're projecting to the future. We both need to, or everyone needs to be open enough to allow the thread to just naturally weave the greater logos, the truth, the underlying connection or something. That's,
Self-organize.
yes, there's a self-organizing process between me and you and me, the whole group, that would have a natural flow or wisdom that comes out. And that's analogous to your true self. So if you're bored enough, then you can have your natural soul wisdom as a thread come out, and then you can follow that thread to cut away all your crappy bad ideas
Yep.
with the sword of discernment,
good.
redemption, so that then you're more solid, you're more human, you're embodied, you're solid, and you have gravity, veritas. He goes into the other angle at the end of this.
Not only are they aligned internally,
So you're aligned here.
they're aligned with everything that's happening around them.
You're aligned with your
That cosmic
environment.
tree that unites levels of being. We can climb that with our consciousness. We do it all the time. You know, if you're writing a book, you concentrate on the word or the paragraph or the whole chapter. You know, and when we're conversing, I could concentrate on each word or the phrase or the sentence or the context, or I could look around the room, up and down these levels of analysis. In yoga, you're trying to get your body psychophysiologically aligned so communication between all those levels isn't interfered with unnecessarily. And then that opens you up in some sense to the possibility of speech emanating from the depth. The fact that
That's
you
the
can
key.
focus your attention almost completely on the current conversation means that the conversation becomes deep. Speech emanating from the depth, that's the logos. Let's focus on that. Well, we can ignore that, we can get rid of that. That's the logos. Speech emanating from the depth.
So speech that emanates from the depth of your soul or from your deeper self, but that requires some level of alignment vertically and fully embodied in your environment to have that speech emanate from the depths.
The cross is an insane symbol, hey? In this context, it's just crazy. Vertical, horizontal. Yep.
Because that's the sort of symbolic energy of the symbol which gets lost with the story. Or they get after the printing press. I think that was Martin Luther. So Martin Luther changed a lot of the modern Christianity. But after the printing press, from that, Christianity became more language-based. Before the language and everyone having a Bible, Christianity was more visual, more imagery. So the symbols and the rituals was more visual. So then the visuals were metaphors. So the cross and all the rituals were metaphorical visuals. We're now, since everybody has text, we're focused on the narrative story of Jesus on the cross and all this stuff. The narrative, the hero narrative of what Jesus did instead of the symbolic visuals of the cross. And temples have, or Christian cathedrals have the point, the geometric structure is a pointer. The space that gives a sense of awe and wonder and reverence, that's also part of the Christian message that gets lost now.
Yeah, being present to others is what you're describing.
Cool, eh?
Yeah, but the being present to others also pointing towards the church, the body of Christ. Isn't that part of the eating the bread or the
horizontal
communion? So that body of Christ was part of the teaching. So it wasn't just one-on-one being present. It was you and the whole. You became the collective. You and the collective of the body of Christ and the church of Christ was part of the teaching. was part of the church, was part of the religion.
Yeah, we are the body of Christ.
Yeah.
So
See, now you say it
representing Christ in the world.
from language, but before the Martin Luther, before the printing press, people experienced that as a visceral embodied experience. And people weren't educated, so now we're assuming everyone can read and write and all this stuff. But pre-printing press, probably at least half of the population couldn't read. They were working with their hands. They had more physical knowledge. They had more metaphorical, grounded wisdom, because they didn't have book knowledge. So the church was transmitting more metaphorical and lifestyle type teachings. And that's the Catholic Church versus evangelical. The Catholic Church is all rituals. Communion, confession, incense.
Spells and bells.
Yeah, spells. Spells, hats, capes.
Bells and bells.
Giant chairs, thrones. It's all kinds of symbolic rituals.
There's so many gay men in the Catholic Church because it's all theatre and fabulous outfits and gorgeous fragrances and yeah.
That's a sort of embodied knowledge. You have to perform it. And there's some level of transmission just by that magical
it's a performative
drama.
nature.
Yeah. That church experience is otherworldly, to try to give body to the teachings, to give
and the
flesh.
combination of the architecture and the music and the smells and it's captivating.
See, now the mega church has become just this giant concert. It's this sugary campus with multi-digital concert type effect to give a sort of sugary artificial spiritual high, versus the old church, which was multi-textural and full performative, awesome, awe-inspiring, humbling. Had a humbling effect. Maybe the current megachurch doesn't have that.
Well, it's reasons why the cathedrals are built the way they are. The ceilings are 400 feet high, so you feel about this big.
Yeah.
It's often said that if Michelangelo had been a heterosexual man, that the walls of the Sistine Chapel would be timber panelled and the ceiling would have been painted white with a roller. And that's probably true.
Timber panel. Well, that was a nice metaphor of the cross, vertical and horizontal, and then the bottom half of the cross is further down. So that's a pointer towards being more grounded. And I think Michael Brown or somebody linked all four directions to something. Someone used described like siblings, parents. Somehow they're connected. I forgot the source. Why am I getting all religious with all these examples talking about the devil, evil?
I don't know what it is, my child. Speak to me.
The childhood sexual abuse stuff, that thread got into the archons, the Sophia and whatnot. That makes some more sense for childhood sexual abuse, the Gnostic version. So maybe humankind was born from sexual abuse, and that's why it just keeps continuing. Or sexual perversion. That's what led to material world.
That's where all the shame was, Garden of Eden and all that crap.
Yeah. Instead of blaming the shame on eating an apple, blame it on Sophia giving birth without a partner. But that's messy.